Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Coffee with Katie. We are channeling the dark side today. Got a nice little eye look, some black lips, my Darth Vader tee from Spacebound Outfitters, and my Darth Vader mug. Today's coffee is from Fable Grounds Coffee. We had a little sample pack that we got, and today's is maple walnut. It's called Werewolf Bite. It's really good. I really like it. We also picked up 2 more bags. The first one we got is Deck of Destiny, which is their salted caramel flavor. And this is Caraval inspired, so you know I had to try this. And another one they had is called the Darkling. And it is a dark roast coffee. This is their shadow blend, so it's not like a flavored coffee, but I believe they did say that it has cinnamon in it. But that's this one. I love trying new brands of coffee, and anything that's bookish is really cool. So if you're interested in checking out Fable Grounds Coffees, I will link that down below. I do apologize in advance. I've had some allergy issues. My throat's kind of itchy, and so if I'm talking and my voice sounds kind of weird, that's why. So just forgive me in advance. But today's video is going to be a review on Wintersong by S Jae-Jones. So this had been on my TBR for quite a while, and I ended up reading this over the period of 4 days. Last weekend when I wasn't feeling super great. And basically what this book is people compare it to a labyrinth retelling, which if you've ever seen that movie that came out in the 80s with David Bowie, that's the labyrinth they're talking about. And I would say it is kind of a labyrinth retelling mixed with different elements, and there's a very big musical component to this. And I would say that the music is actually part of the magic system as well. There's not a big or fleshed out magic system, but more so dark underworld type law. So the premise of this book is that the main character, Liesel, or Elizabeth, has these dreams when she was younger that she was friends with the Goblin King, and she would sing for him and compose music for him and play with him as a child. And when she grows up, she kind of leaves all of that fantasy behind her and is kind of a responsible person in her family. Her father's kind of a drunk, her mom is running this inn, and she kind of looks after her younger brother and her younger sister and just becomes more of a parental figure. And so she kind of leaves all these fantasies behind her until she realizes that the Goblin King is not a fantasy, he's actually real. And the story kind of revolves around the Goblin King having this, I wouldn't necessarily say obsession, but just kind of this fascination with Liesel and wanting her to come back to him with her music and what she has to offer him and her friendship. So the Goblin King, being kind of a mischievous devil underworld type character, takes her sister to the underground, which is like the underworld, and makes it into a game where Liesel has to figure out how to get her sister and save her sister and bring her back. So that's kind of the premise of this book. But diving in a little bit deeper, Liesel is very responsible in her family, and as such, I think she has a little bit of resentment towards them, and she kind of wants to live her own life, but she feels like she can't. And she also has been kind of beat down her whole life with her father telling her her musical career was gonna go nowhere, she was nothing, that kind of a thing, and them focusing on her brother as a musical prodigy. And then her sister being extremely beautiful and Liesel being very plain and unattractive kind of put her in this place of feeling like she is overlooked or ignored or not noticed most of the time. So she's kind of seeking validation. And basically nobody believes that the Goblin King exists except for her and her grandmother and kind of her brother. She has a stronger attachment towards her little brother because of an event in the past, and for that reason, she wasn't keeping as close eye on her sister, and that's how her sister gets taken by the Goblin King. And so the book kind of unfolds where she's going into the underground, trying to find how to get there, to retrieve her sister, and then it kind of unraveling from there. I'm gonna kind of go delve into my thoughts on this book without spoiling anything. So Liesel goes into this journey to save her sister. There are goblins in the underground, obviously there's the Goblin King, and there were a lot of interesting elements of this book. So music was a big component of this book, and it was very classical style music, and it was very in depth with the musical terminology and jargon. And in fact, if you go into this book, it'll have a guide to names and titles because it's very German based, a guide to German phrases, and a guide to musical terms. So S Jae-Jones delves deeply into the musical realm and in the composing and the beauty of music and what it can do for you, and it's kind of woven into the magic of this world. And the goblin-like creatures, there's some of them that are more human-esque. There's some of them that are very strangely described, having really long fingers with too many joints and just kind of really creepy aesthetic. And then there's like other type creatures that look pretty human, but their like eyes are all black. Overall, I would say that I enjoyed this book. However, I do feel like there was quite a bit of like pacing issues. For instance, the first third of this book, I thought was gonna be like the entire book, but it was only the first third. And then I really liked the first third of the book, and I really liked the second third of the book. But that middle third was a strange fever dream, negative, just kind of very dark and kind of self-destructive thing. And it just felt like that piece didn't fit with the rest of the flow of the book. I understand why it was there, but it just felt like a totally different tone than everything else. And one of the things it talks about is that she is not very pretty, and the Goblin King is not really that attracted to her because, and they're kind of described in this way that the really pretty ones are a fast burning flame and she is a more sustaining warmth or flame. And I feel like there's a very unhealthy aspect to this with her and her appearance and her just wanting to be validated, which I understand. If you've been beat down and kind of told you're worthless your whole life, you're gonna have elements of that. But it did feel a little bit unhealthy the way she was dealing with all of these things, and she was not a likable character, I would say. So I think all of this again is intentional and on purpose to show you what she was going through and how she was just coping with it because she didn't know how. But like I said, the middle third of this book was kind of bizarre. And there were parts of this book that were very magical and very interesting, and there were parts of this book that were very grotesque, like beetles glamored to look like food. So when she sees other people eating this, she sees that they're eating beetles, and just stuff like that was just really gross. More horror-esque almost. And there's quite a bit of mystery, I feel like, still left in this book. You don't really understand, I would say, who the Goblin King is completely, and what that means for the story moving forward, because there is a second book. So overall, I really enjoyed this, but like I said, there was a place in the middle. So I really liked the first part, that was really fun. Really liked the end, thought it was interesting. But this middle part, I feel like I almost got lost in it, and I wanted to finish it, so I trekked through and I was like curious about the story and kept going, read it very quickly. But I feel like the middle could lose a lot of people, and it could kind of make people put this book down, DNF it, not have interest, because you can't really understand what's happening or where it's going, and it just seems very bleak. And, you know, this is coming from somebody that loves vicious and other dark character stories, like Darth Vader and Anakin Skywalker. But this was just a little off for me. So because of all of those reasons I mentioned, I did give this 3 stars, which is not a bad rating, but I would say that's because I really liked the first part of the book and the last part of the book, but the middle really drug it down for me. It also had, this is a YA book, and it did have some like more adult-ish themes that I'm used to seeing in a YA book. There is some spicy, like, intimate scenes, so if you're not into that, just be aware of that in this book. I honestly did not really expect that to be in this book, nor did I expect a lot. One of the reasons I did pick this book up was because I heard if you love Caraval, you will like this book. And I kind of see where people are coming with that, because it's almost taking a Jax-like character and making him win, essentially, and then how that relationship plays out. But again, not completely. It's not like cookie cutter Jax into this book. It's not that, obviously. But it's a similar type character, just done in a different way. So I can see that aspect of it, but other than that, I don't really understand the comparison of Caraval. Not that they were comparing it, just saying, like, if you enjoyed Caraval, you would enjoy this. I would say that could be the case, but this did not compare to Caraval to me in the amount of enjoyment I took from it, and the amount of, like, whimsical, magical, fun aspects of this. There were a couple of plot points that are not wrapped up, as I kind of mentioned, which is obviously because there's a second book. And I am going to continue the duology and see how it ends, but I feel kind of meh about this right now. I feel like it wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. But if you are looking for a very wintry, German-inspired, music-heavy, dark fairy tale-esque type story, I think you will enjoy this. I do think it was a little more grotesque than I was expecting personally, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something to be aware of. It was just a very odd balance of magical and beautiful, but also, like I said, very grotesque, very sinister, but it was a fun read. I did read it fairly quickly. So if any of that aesthetic sounds good to you, I would go ahead and pick up this book. So that was my little rambling mini review for Wintersong by S Jae-Jones. If you've read that book, let me know what you think in the comments down below, or if you're interested in reading that book. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time. Bye.